I will never forget the morning it all started. It was like any other day, or so I thought. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, glancing at the news on my tablet. Olivia was upstairs getting ready for school, and the house was quiet, too quiet in hindsight. Sarah was moving around the kitchen, but something about her was different. After 17 years of marriage, you get to know the little things. The way she didn't make eye contact, the way her hands trembled slightly as she held her coffee cup. I didn't ask. I didn't push her, though looking back, maybe I should have. Maybe I should have braced myself for what was coming. She set her cup down, sighed heavily, and looked right at me. That look, it said everything before she even opened her mouth. I knew, deep down, something was wrong. We need to talk, she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. I put my tablet down, feeling the tension in the air. What's going on? She sat across from me, folding her hands on the table. Mark, I want a divorce. It was like the floor had dropped out from under me. Divorce? Sure, we'd had our struggles like any couple, but this was out of nowhere. What? Why? I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't even blink. I've met someone else. Someone I've been seeing for a while. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Who? Victor, she said, as if dropping his name wouldn't hit me like a punch to the gut. Victor. I knew him. He had been her boss years ago, before she quit to stay home with the kids. I met him at a few work events, and something about him always rubbed me the wrong way. Now I knew why. I stared at her, my mind reeling. How long? A few years, she admitted, her voice still emotionless. Victor separated from his wife. He wants me and Ethan to move in with him. I sat there in stunned silence. She didn't even try to soften the blow. Victor wants her and Ethan. Ethan, my son, or at least the boy I thought was my son. What are you talking about? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan isn't yours, Mark, she said, as if it was nothing. He's Victor's. He's always been Victor's. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. All the air left the room. The boy I'd raised for 13 years wasn't mine? My mind went blank. I couldn't process it. Victor and I were ready to start our life together, Sarah continued. He wants Ethan to live with us full time. And Olivia, well, she should spend more time with us too. Victor can give the kids a better future than you ever could. That's when my shock turned to anger. I stared at her, barely able to believe the words coming out of her mouth. What do you mean, a better future? I've given them everything. I've been here. I've raised them. Sarah shook her head, that same cold, distant expression on her face. You're a good father, Mark, but let's face it, Victor has the kind of life that can provide for them in ways you never could. He's successful, powerful. You've been stuck in your career for too long. You've always made a good income, but you're still just an IT specialist. You could have done more, but you chose to stay where you were. That's fine for you, but it's not what the kids need. Her words cut deeper than any betrayal could. Just an IT specialist? I'd built a solid career. I made good money. I'd chosen stability so I could spend more time with the family, so I could be there for the kids as they grew up. I had put my ambitions aside, but not because I wasn't capable. I'd done it for them. For the family that she now wanted to take away from me. I felt my fists clench under the table, but I kept my voice steady. So, what? You think Victor can just buy their love? You think because he's rich, that makes him a better father? Sarah shrugged. Victor wants to be involved, and he can offer them things you never will. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And Olivia? I asked, my voice rough. She's not Victor's. Are you planning to take her away from me too? She'll split her time between us, Sarah said coolly. Victor can provide her with opportunities that you can't. I'm not saying she won't see you, but I want her to be with us more than with you. It's what's best for her. What's best for her? I echoed, my blood boiling. You don't get to decide that. You think uprooting our lives, throwing this all at me, and moving her into some fantasy world with your rich boyfriend is what's best for her. Sarah didn't flinch. Victor and I have been planning this for a while. It's happening, Mark. I'm filing for divorce, and I'll be filing for full custody of Ethan. There's no point in you seeing him unless Victor's okay with it, but Ethan will be living with Victor all time. That's the life he deserves. I stood up, my chair scraping the floor as I pushed it back. I couldn't sit there and listen to this any longer. I had no idea how I was going to fix this. I need to go, I muttered, grabbing my keys off the counter. Mark, she started, but I cut her off. I can't be here right now. I left the house, slamming the door behind me. I got in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind was spinning, my chest tight with rage, betrayal, and the sinking realization that my life had been a lie. I don't know what I expected after that day, but I didn't have much time to process it before the legal wheels started turning. Less than a week after Sarah dropped the bomb about the divorce, I was served with the paperwork. Of course, Victor was behind it. I could see his fingerprints all over the legal language, tight, precise, and favoring Sarah in every possible way. She wasn't just leaving, she was trying to take everything. It wasn't just about splitting time with the kids. No, Sarah was filing for full custody of Ethan, and she didn't even try to hide the fact that Victor wanted to cut me out completely. In her filing, there was a note, cold and direct, saying that continued visitation between Mark and Ethan will be at Victor's discretion. Victor's discretion. The words still echoed in my head like a bad joke. He wanted to shield Ethan from me, as if I hadn't raised him for the last 13 years. As if I was just some passing figure in his life. But I wasn't about to let that happen. A few days after the papers arrived, Sarah asked me to sit down with her to talk to the kids together. I knew this moment was coming, the dreaded conversation. Olivia and Ethan had no idea what was going on yet, and I had no idea how to explain it to them. But when Sarah asked me to do it her way, I already knew I couldn't agree. We sat down in the living room, the tension between us thick as a storm cloud. The kids, sitting across from us on the couch, were confused. I could see it in their eyes, especially Olivia's. She was 16, smart enough to know something was wrong, but still too innocent to understand the extent of it. Sarah spoke first, her voice gentle, playing the role of the concerned mother. Kids, your dad and I, we're going through something difficult. We've decided that it's time for us to live separately. It's what's best for everyone. I watched their faces, my heart breaking as I saw the shock hit them. Ethan looked up at me, his eyes wide and full of questions. Olivia's expression hardened, like she was trying to process it all without showing emotion. We're getting a divorce, I added quietly, my voice thick. But no matter what happens between your mother and me, we'll always love you. That won't change. For a moment, there was silence. Olivia was the first to speak. But why? She asked, her voice cracking. What happened? Sarah glanced at me, a quick flash of discomfort crossing her face before she regained her composure. It's just, we're different people now, and there's someone else in my life. Someone who has been very important to me. Ethan looked confused, but Olivia's eyes narrowed. She wasn't buying it. Who? Olivia asked, her tone sharp. His name is Victor, Sarah said softly. He's someone I've known for a long time, and he wants to be part of our lives. Ethan, especially, you'll be spending more time with him. At that moment, I couldn't keep quiet anymore. Hold on, Sarah. The kids are old enough to make their own decisions. They'll decide how they want to split their time. I have every right to see Ethan, no matter what Victor thinks. Sarah's face tightened, but she kept her voice smooth. Mark, I'm just thinking about what's best for them. Victor can offer them more than you can, better opportunities, a better future. Don't pull that, I snapped, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I've been their father from the start, and that's not going to change because you want to play house with your new boyfriend. Ethan's my son, and I have every right to see him. Olivia too. They can decide for themselves what they want. I could see the flicker of frustration in Sarah's eyes, but she forced a smile and turned back to the kids. We'll figure everything out in time. Right now, I just want what's best for you. Ethan looked lost, his young face twisted with confusion. But why can't we just stay like we are? My heart broke seeing the uncertainty in his eyes. He had no idea that his whole world had just been turned upside down. Olivia, on the other hand, crossed her arms, her face set in a scowl. I don't want to live with some guy we don't even know. Sarah sighed, keeping up her soft tone. It's a lot to take in right now, but trust me, Victor cares about you both. He wants to be part of your lives. I couldn't take it anymore. Enough, I said, standing up. We'll talk about this more later. Right now, the kids need time to process what's going on. They don't need you throwing Victor at them like a solution. Sarah gave me a sharp look but didn't argue. Instead, she nodded and said, "We'll revisit the custody arrangement soon. But maybe we could make this easier on everyone. Let's take it slow." I didn't trust the sudden change in her tone. I could tell she was up to something. "I'll reconsider my requests," she said, offering me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But let's not make this harder for the kids right now. What if I take them to see Victor this weekend? Just to get them used to the idea." I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to say no. But I was exhausted, emotionally drained from the whole conversation, and the kids were staring at us, waiting for an answer. Maybe I thought it was better to let them go for a weekend. It might give me time to clear my head and figure out how to deal with this mess. "Fine," I said, hating myself the second the word left my mouth. "Just this weekend." Sarah's smile widened. "Thank you, Mark. I'll make sure it's a smooth transition. You'll see, they'll be fine." She made it sound so simple, like it was just a weekend trip. But something about the way she said it, about the way she'd twisted the conversation, felt wrong. As I watched her leave with the kids that Friday evening, my gut told me I'd made a mistake. Now you're about to find out why it was a mistake, and also why Mark will lose everything and then a miracle happens. But I ask you to subscribe to the channel right now. The weekend dragged by, heavier than I expected. I spent most of it pacing around the house, unable to shake the feeling that I'd just handed my kids over to Victor on a silver platter. Something about the way Sarah had manipulated me into agreeing gnawed at the back of my mind, but I kept telling myself that it was just a few days. Maybe I was overthinking it. By Sunday night, when Sarah finally pulled up with Olivia and Ethan, I felt a flicker of relief. That was until I saw them get out of the car. They were smiling, beaming, actually, and that immediately put me on edge. It wasn't the kind of happy you get from spending time with your family. It was the kind of happy that comes when you've just been spoiled rotten. Olivia was the first to walk up to the house, carrying what looked like a brand new designer handbag. I recognized the brand, very expensive thing. Olivia was also decked out in new clothes, clearly high-end. Ethan followed close behind, glued to a brand new iPhone, and strapped to his back was an expensive virtual reality helmet. His eyes were wide with excitement as he scrolled through the phone, barely looking up at me. "Hey, Dad," Ethan said brightly, running past me into the house. "Look what Victor got me. Isn't it awesome?" I forced a smile, though my stomach turned at the mention of Victor. "What's that?" I asked, pointing to the helmet. "Oh, it's a virtual reality thing," Ethan said, barely glancing at me. "Victor said I could pick anything I wanted, so I got this. And the new iPhone. It's way better than my old one." I nodded, trying not to let my frustration show. It was already obvious what was happening. Victor wasn't just trying to win the kids over. He was buying them, plain and simple. Olivia followed Ethan inside, showing off her new bag. "Victor took us shopping," she said, her voice dripping with enthusiasm. "I got a few things, shoes, clothes, this bag. Isn't it cool?" I looked at her, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Nice stuff." She smiled but didn't meet my eyes. She was avoiding me, like she knew what I was thinking but didn't want to confront it. I could feel the distance growing between us, and it scared me. I sat down with them at the dinner table, trying to ask about their weekend, hoping to get some sense of normalcy back. "So, how was the weekend with Victor?" I asked, doing my best to sound casual. "It was great," Ethan chirped, eyes still glued to his phone. "He's awesome. We went to his house. It's huge. And he's got, like, everything. We played games, went shopping, even had dinner at a fancy restaurant. It was way cooler than..." Well, he trailed off, and I could see the hesitation in his eyes as he looked up at me. "Victor's my new dad now. He's cool, but you're still my first dad." My heart sank at those words. First dad. It felt like a slap in the face. I knew Victor had been gunning for this, trying to step in as the father figure, but hearing it from Ethan, that was worse than anything I could have imagined. But I couldn't blame Ethan. He was 13, impressionable, and Victor was showing him a world I could never compete with, at least not materially. I forced a smile and nodded, even though it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "I'm glad you had fun," I said, swallowing the anger that bubbled beneath the surface. "But remember, you'll always have me, no matter what." Ethan shrugged and went back to his phone. I turned to Olivia, hoping for anything that might reassure me. But before I could ask, she let something slip. "Yeah, I've known Victor for a while," she said offhandedly. "I used to see him with Mom sometimes, before the divorce." I froze. "What did you say?" Olivia's eyes widened, realizing her mistake. Nothing. I mean, just I saw him a couple of times, that's all. It wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal. Sarah had clearly been bringing Victor around long before I knew about the affair, and Olivia knew more than she was letting on. When I pressed her, she clammed up, mumbling excuses and trying to change the subject. She didn't want to talk about it, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. I let it go for now. The last thing I wanted to do was push her further away. Over the next few weeks, things only got worse. The kids started spending more and more time at Victor's place. It didn't matter if it was a weekday or a weekend. Sometimes they'd be gone without even telling me. When I tried to talk to Sarah about it, she brushed me off. "They're old enough to make their own decisions, Mark," she said coldly. "If they want to spend time with Victor, that's their choice." But it wasn't their choice. It was manipulation. I could see it. Every time the kids came back, they had new gifts, more designer clothes for Olivia, more gadgets for Ethan. Victor had found their weak spots and was exploiting them. And then, the divorce trial began. That's when the truth hit me like a truck. Sarah had lied. All that talk about reconsidering the custody demands, it was a ploy, a distraction. She had never changed her mind. She still wanted full custody of Ethan, and now she was pushing for Olivia to live with her and Victor too, except for weekends, when I get a few crumbs of time with her. I'd been played. Sarah had used that weekend to drive a wedge between me and the kids, and now Victor was stepping in as the father figure I was supposed to be. He wasn't just generous. He was calculated. He had money, power, and a smile that never reached his eyes, but the worst part? The kids were falling for it. When I confronted Sarah after one of the court hearings, she was smug, standing next to Victor like they were already one big happy family. "You lied to me," I spat, barely able to keep my voice steady. "You said you'd reconsider. And now you're trying to take them away." Sarah's face was stone cold. "I'm doing what's best for them, Mark. And frankly, Victor can offer them more than you ever could. You're just going to have to accept that. And what about what I've given them?" I asked, the anger rising in my chest. "I've been there for them their whole lives. I've raised them. I've loved them." Victor, who'd been standing quietly beside her, finally spoke, a smirk playing on his lips. "You've done your part, Mark, but now it's time to move on. The kids deserve the best." His smugness, the way he said the best, like I was nothing more than an obstacle, like I was replaceable, it made my blood boil. But I held it together. Barely. Back at home, the kids weren't making things any easier. They were hesitant, conflicted, but the more time they spent with Sarah and Victor, the more they began to drift. They weren't outright rejecting me, but I could feel it, the slow pull away from me and toward them. I had been sidelined. And no matter how much it hurt, I loved them too much to push them away. I kept the door open, hoping they'd see through the lies, hoping they'd come back to me. But the betrayal stung. It stung in ways I hadn't expected. Watching Olivia and Ethan slowly warm to Sarah and Victor's bribery, seeing how they hesitated before calling me dad, how they spoke about Victor like he was some hero. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than anything I'd experienced. I could feel my anger growing, not just at Sarah, but at the man who stood beside her, smug and confident that he could buy my children's loyalty. Victor. He mocked me with his smiles, his condescending pats on the back, as if I was supposed to be grateful for him stepping in. After the court hearings were over, I felt like I'd been gutted. I had lost, plain and simple. Sarah and Victor didn't just hire expensive lawyers. They played the game to perfection, using their wealth, influence, and strategic gifts to win over the children. It wasn't just a legal loss. It was personal. They had taken the two most important people in my life and turned them against me. Victor had even gone so far as to give Olivia a brand new convertible, a flashy model, the kind of car every 16-year-old dreams of. I remember the day I saw her driving it, pulling up to my house on a weekend visit. The look of excitement on her face stung more than any argument in court ever could. Everything had been set up for their victory from the start. And now Olivia and Ethan had all but distanced themselves from me completely. Olivia still came over on weekends, but it felt forced. It was like she was coming out of respect, maybe even out of guilt. I could see it in the way she acted. As soon as she arrived, she was already looking at her phone, checking messages, and making plans to meet up with her friends. Her new life, with her new car, her new social circle, and her new aspirations, didn't leave much room for me. She was excited about the future, talking about which universities she wanted to go to, which cities she wanted to travel to. The freedom Victor's money provided had already started shaping her into someone I barely recognized. It wasn't her fault. She was still young, still impressionable, and her interests were understandable. But the reality of it hurt all the same. Ethan, though, that was harder. He had completely distanced. I tried reaching out. I sent him messages, asking how he was doing, if he wanted to meet up, but the silence on the other end was deafening. No response. It was as if I didn't exist anymore. I didn't blame him. He was 13, easily manipulated, especially with Victor's charm and Sarah's subtle nudging. But it still felt like a knife in the back every time I saw a new picture of him posted on Sarah's social media, always smiling, always with Victor by his side. I wasn't angry at them. They were still young, and their minds had been molded by Victor's wealth and promises. I knew they'd been manipulated, but understanding that didn't make it easier. I had lost them. It was during those few months after the trial that I reached my lowest point. The depression hit me like a wave, and I couldn't seem to find my way back to the surface. I had no fight left in me. My wife had left me for another man, and now my children had chosen that man over me. I was a father in name only, a presence they tolerated but no longer needed. I quit my job during that time. I couldn't focus on anything anymore, and honestly, I didn't care. The anger and sadness had consumed me. I had been an IT specialist for years, but it wasn't like I needed to work immediately. I had savings, and I could afford to take a break. So I did. I let myself spiral. I stayed home, alone with my thoughts, sinking deeper into the pit I had built for myself. As for Ethan, well, I gave up after a while. The silence was too much. I had tried to fight, but what was the point? I had lost this battle before it even began, and it felt like I hadn't really fought at all. It was like I hadn't read Sun Tzu's The Art of War. I'd read it, of course. Hell, I'd practically studied it. But apparently, I'd learned nothing from it. Every strategic move I could have made, every opportunity to strike back, had slipped through my fingers. And now I was sitting in my empty house, staring at a life that had passed me by. I was alone. A loner by circumstance, not by choice. My children had new lives, new dreams, and a new father figure. Victor had one. Sarah had one. And I was left behind, licking my wounds and trying to figure out how to move on. It was during one of those long, empty days that I got a call from Dave, an old friend and colleague. He had heard about the divorce, the court battle, everything. He didn't push me to talk about it. Dave had always been that way, quiet but understanding. I wasn't in the mood to talk, but he made a suggestion that I couldn't ignore. "Let's grab a drink," he said, his voice easy, like this wasn't the first time he had invited me out. "You've been holed up long enough, man. Let's just get out, have a beer, talk about anything but your situation. I hesitated. The truth was, I hadn't been out in months. I hadn't seen friends, hadn't socialized. Depression has a way of isolating you, making it feel impossible to do anything beyond existing. But I was tired of the same four walls, tired of drowning in my own thoughts. Yeah, I said, surprising even myself. Yeah, all right. Let's go. That night, Dave and I met at a small bar downtown, a place we used to hang out at after work, back when things were normal, back when I still had a family to come home to. We grabbed a booth near the back, and for the first time in months, I let myself relax. Just a little. We ordered drinks, and Dave didn't press me on anything. We talked about work, the people we used to work with, the old projects we'd worked on together. It was easy, the way conversation used to be. And for a while, I forgot about everything. Forgot about Victor and Sarah. Forgot about the kids pulling away. I was just Mark again. After a few more drinks, Dave leaned in, his eyes sharp and focused in a way I hadn't seen in a while. We talked about everything that night, old times, work, but suddenly, the conversation shifted. His voice dropped slightly, like he was about to tell me something important. You know, Mark, Dave said, glancing around the bar as if to make sure no one else was listening, I've been working on something. A project. And I need someone with your skills on board. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of project? Dave grinned. I'm putting together a team to launch a startup. If everything works out, we'll all have a share in the company. It's not a sure thing, but it's got serious potential. I need someone who can handle the tech side, someone who knows their way around systems, security, and infrastructure. And I thought of you. At first, I wasn't sure what to say. The past few months had been a blur of depression, anger, and a sense of failure. I wasn't sure if I had anything left in me to give. But as Dave talked, I felt a spark I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just the alcohol talking, this was an opportunity. A chance to dig myself out of the hole I'd been stuck in, to finally fight back against the sense of helplessness that had consumed me. Dave saw the hesitation on my face and pressed on. Look, man, I know you've been through hell. But this could be it. You've always been the smartest guy I know when it comes to tech. I need you on this. We could do something big here. I stared at my drink, the amber liquid swirling in the glass. For months, I'd been lost, letting Sarah and Victor take everything from me. I had quit my job, isolated myself, and drifted into a dark place I wasn't sure I could climb out of. But this was a lifeline. A way out. All right, I said, setting my glass down with a finality I hadn't felt in a long time. I'm in. The next 4 months were like nothing I'd ever experienced. Dave wasn't kidding, this project was big. We pulled together a small team, just a handful of people, but they were the best in their fields. We worked long hours, late nights, pouring everything we had into the startup. It wasn't just a job, it was an obsession. For the first time in months, I felt alive. My depression started to lift as the work pulled me out of the darkness I'd been drowning in. I wasn't thinking about Sarah or Victor or even the kids as much. Instead, I was buried in lines of code, security protocols, and learning new technologies that stretched me beyond what I thought I could do. It was exactly what I needed. My knowledge, which had been gathering dust during those wasted months, suddenly came alive again. Every bit of experience I'd gained over the years came into play. And I wasn't just using my old skills, I was learning new ones, diving into areas I'd never had the time or energy to explore before. The work was intense, but it was paying off. We hit every milestone, exceeded our projections, and by the time those 4 months were over, we had launched our business. And not just launched it, we had taken off like a rocket. We secured investors, locked in partnerships, and before I knew it, our small startup was making waves in the industry. It was exhilarating. The success of the company became my lifeline, pulling me further and further away from the dark hole I had been in. I was immersed in something that gave me purpose again. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a failure. I felt like I was finally winning. It wasn't just about the work either. The financial projections were insane. We started with nothing, just an idea and a few smart people, but we were on track to become rich, seriously rich. Within the next few months, if things continued at the same pace, we'd be looking at massive payoffs. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. But just as I started to feel like I was standing on solid ground again, something happened. It was late one evening when my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. At first, I thought it might be another work-related message, or maybe even a misdial. But then I saw the text. "Dad, how are you doing? I'm sorry I didn't write to you sooner. It's not my fault." I stared at the screen, frozen. "Dad, Ethan." My hands shook as I typed back. "Ethan? Is that you?" His reply came almost instantly. "Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't message you sooner. Victor, he wouldn't let me." I felt a lump form in my throat. I hadn't heard from Ethan in months, and I had convinced myself that he had just moved on, that he didn't want anything to do with me anymore. But now, seeing those words, my heart raced. "What do you mean, he wouldn't let you?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. Ethan's response was slow, like he was choosing his words carefully. "As soon as I started living with Victor, he told me not to talk to you. He said it was better for everyone. But it's not fair, Dad. I wanted to reach out, but I was afraid of what he'd do. I'm using a friend's phone right now so he doesn't find out." My stomach churned as I read his words. I knew Victor was controlling, but forbidding Ethan from talking to me, I had underestimated how deep his manipulation went. Too stern a person. Those words echoed in my head, and the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Ethan was afraid of Victor. "Ethan, I'm so sorry," I typed, trying to steady my hands. "But why didn't you tell me sooner?" There was a long pause before he responded. "Because he scares me, Dad." Those words broke me. My son, my boy, living in fear under the roof of a man who had stolen everything from me. I felt anger surge through me, but I knew I had to keep calm. This wasn't about me. It was about Ethan. "I love you, Ethan. And I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm here for you. Always. We'll figure something out, okay? I'll think of something." His reply came fast, and I could feel the emotion in his words. "I love you too, Dad. I try to be strong, but it's hard. Victor, he's always watching, always telling me what to do. I want to see you, but I can't. He'll know." I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to wrap my head around what my son was going through. I had no idea it had gotten this bad. Ethan wasn't just avoiding me, he was trapped. "We'll figure this out," I typed, my mind racing with possibilities. "I'm so proud of you for reaching out. We'll get through this together, I promise." Ethan didn't say much after that, just thanked me and told me he would try to find a way to contact me again soon. Before he ended the conversation, he admitted that he had borrowed his school friend's phone to text me. The fact that my son had to go through such lengths just to reach me made my heart ache. I wanted to break down that wall Victor had built around him, but I knew I had to be smart about it. 2 weeks later, something else happened. Something that shook me to my core. It was a Friday night, and I was sitting in the living room, trying to focus on a book, but finding it hard to concentrate. Work had been a distraction, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, about what he had told me. I had been trying to come up with a plan, some way to help him, when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it, and there, standing on the porch, was Olivia. Her eyes were red, her cheeks streaked with tears. She looked up at me, and before I could say a word, she rushed forward, wrapping her arms around me and sobbing into my chest. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she whispered between sobs. "I'm so sorry. I've been such a fool." I hugged her tight, my heart breaking all over again. "It's okay, Olivia," I said softly, guiding her into the house. "It's okay. You're here now. That's all that matters." We sat down in the kitchen, and I made her some tea, the way I used to when she was a little girl and had bad dreams. As she held the warm cup in her hands, she finally started to talk, her voice trembling. "I've been such an idiot, Dad," she said, her tears still flowing. I let myself get swept up in all of it. The luxury, the cars, the clothes. Victor made everything seem so perfect. but I didn't see what was really happening. I didn't see how much I was hurting you. I shook my head, placing a hand on hers. You don't have to explain. I understand. I never blamed you for any of this. She looked up at me, her eyes full of guilt. But I knew about him, Dad. I knew about Victor. I've known for years. 3 years ago, I saw him with Mom. I saw them together, and she made me promise not to say anything. I felt my heart drop. 3 years. Olivia nodded, wiping her eyes. I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe it wasn't my business. But now, I see how wrong I was. And it's not just that. Victor, he's not who he pretends to be. He's controlling, Dad. He's been blackmailing me, threatening me. He's always interfering in my life, telling me what to do. He's been making plans for me, trying to mold me into what he wants. What do you mean? I asked, my voice low, my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Olivia stared down at her tea, her hands shaking. He's got plans for me, Dad. He wants me to be like him. He's pushing me into things I don't want, trying to control my life, my choices. I can't take it anymore. I don't know what to do. I felt my blood run cold. Victor wasn't just trying to replace me as their father. He was trying to shape Olivia into something he could control. Something that fit his twisted vision of their family. I leaned forward, looking her in the eyes. You don't have to do anything he says. You're your own person, Olivia. And if he's threatening you, we'll figure this out. I won't let him keep hurting you. You can stay here with me. She nodded, her tears flowing again as she hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything. I held her close, my heart breaking all over again, but this time there was something else stirring inside me. It wasn't just sadness. It was fury. As Olivia calmed down, I could see the guilt weighing heavily on her. She sipped her tea, her hands shaking slightly. Then she looked up at me, her eyes red from crying. Dad, I need to tell you something, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. About the trial. About why Ethan and I took Mom and Victor's side. I braced myself, not sure if I was ready to hear it, but I nodded for her to continue. Victor and Mom, they turned us against you, she said, her voice cracking. They told us things, awful things. They said that you hated us, that you were just pretending to be a good father, but deep down, you didn't want us around. Victor kept saying that you were holding back your anger, that one day you'd just snap. I felt my chest tighten, my heart breaking all over again. They had poisoned my children's minds. The indifference I saw in the courtroom wasn't because they didn't care, it was because they were afraid. He kept hinting that if I was a good girl, I'd get rewards. Olivia continued, her eyes dropping to her lap. He'd say things like, if you help us, you'll get something nice, but he never said what. And if I said anything in your favor, he'd make it clear that I'd regret it. That's why I acted like I didn't care. I didn't know what to do. My blood boiled at her words. Victor hadn't just manipulated them, he had threatened them. And Sarah, she had stood by and let it happen. What about Ethan? I asked, my voice tight with anger. Olivia sighed, wiping her eyes. Victor's been putting so much pressure on him, Dad. Ever since the beginning, he's been on Ethan's case about everything. Controlling him. Telling him what to think, what to say. Ethan's scared of him, but he doesn't know how to fight back. He's trapped. The fury building inside me was almost too much to contain. Victor wasn't just authoritarian, he was a tyrant. He had taken my children and turned them into pawns in his twisted game of control. And Sarah, what about your mother? I asked, my voice sharp. Why is she happy with all this? Olivia looked away, her expression conflicted. I don't know, Dad. She seems happy, like she's getting exactly what she wanted. She doesn't seem to care about what it's doing to us. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my anger in check. Olivia must have sensed the tension because she suddenly looked up, panic in her eyes. Do you hate me? She asked, her voice trembling. I was so stupid, Dad. I didn't tell you earlier, I didn't. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. No, Olivia. I could never hate you. I love you. I've always loved you. I was upset, sure, but I never thought badly of you. Not for a second. She let out a shaky breath, nodding as tears welled up again. I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have told you sooner. I squeezed her hand. It's okay. We're going to fight this. But I need time, okay? We'll figure this out. Just then, my phone rang. I looked down at the screen and saw Sarah's name flashing. Olivia's eyes widened, and she immediately started shaking her head, gesturing frantically for me to lie. I answered, keeping my voice steady. Hello? Mark, Sarah's voice came through, sharp and direct. Where's Olivia? Is she with you? I glanced at Olivia, who was silently pleading with me to keep her presence a secret. My stomach twisted, but I knew what I had to do. No, I lied, keeping my voice calm. I haven't seen her. There was a pause on the other end, then Sarah spoke again. All right, let me know if she shows up. I hung up the phone and turned to Olivia, who looked relieved. Olivia stayed the night at my place, curled up in the guest room, still shaken but calmer than before. She asked me to save her, to help her escape from Victor and Sarah's grasp. I promised her that I would. I wasn't going to let Victor keep controlling her or Ethan. I'm going to start a new court case, I told her softly, sitting beside her on the bed. We'll review the custody issue. But I need time. I have to assemble a solid team of lawyers, the best I can find. You just need to trust me, okay? Olivia nodded, though I could see the fear still flickering in her eyes. What do I do in the meantime? I leaned forward, my voice low. You have to keep playing the role. Be the good girl. Don't let Victor or your mom suspect anything. Act like everything is normal. If they think something's up, they'll move against us before we're ready. She hesitated, then nodded again. I'll try, but I'm scared. I know, I said, squeezing her hand. But you're strong. I know you are. Just trust me, and don't let them know we're communicating. If they find out, they'll act preemptively. Stay calm. We're going to fight this together. I could see the resolve hardening in her eyes. She was afraid, but she was ready. I had given her hope, and now it was up to me to follow through. The next morning, I dove back into work, more motivated than ever. Our startup was doing well, and I needed to accelerate things so I could get that big payout, money that I'd use to hire the best legal team I could find. I also reached out to Dave, my friend and colleague, and told him everything. I need to know everything about Victor, I said. I don't care what it takes. Dave didn't even hesitate. I'm in. We'll dig up what we can, even if it means using a few unconventional methods. It wasn't long before we started digging deeper into Victor's life. With a few hacker tricks, we were able to gather some background information, his business dealings, his financial records. Nothing concrete yet, but enough to give us a starting point. A couple of weeks passed, and Olivia managed to secretly arrange a meeting between me, her, and Ethan. We met in a small, quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. I hadn't seen Ethan in months, and when he walked in and saw me, his face lit up. Dad, he cried, running over and hugging me tightly. I held him close, feeling the weight of everything crash down on me. Ethan, I whispered, my voice thick. I missed you, buddy. He pulled back, tears in his eyes. I wanted to call you back then, when we first moved in with Victor. I saw your messages, but... He trailed off and Olivia stepped in. Victor hit him on the hand, Dad. He took Ethan's phone away and put everything under control. Ethan nodded, his voice small. I understand he's my biological father, but you're my real dad. You taught me everything. I love you. Hearing those words broke me, but they also strengthened my resolve. Victor may have tried to replace me, but Ethan still saw me as his father. I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from him or from me. I'm so sorry, Ethan, I said, feeling a lump in my throat. But we're going to fix this. I promise. We didn't have much time. Olivia kept glancing over her shoulder, worried that someone would notice. We talked quickly, catching up on what had happened, and I gave them hope that everything was going to change soon. When the time comes, when we go back to court, I said, looking at both of them, don't be afraid to tell the truth. No matter what Victor or your mom says. You have to be honest." They both nodded, determination in their eyes. "We will," Olivia said, her voice firm. "I promise, Dad," Ethan added. "Everything will be as it should be." We hugged one last time before we parted ways. It wasn't long, but it was enough. I could see the fire in their eyes. They were ready to fight, just like I was. I knew that what I was about to do was illegal, but at that point, I didn't care. The lives of my children were at stake, and Victor had taken too much from me already. If he thought he could continue manipulating Olivia and Ethan, then he underestimated just how far I was willing to go. With the help of Dave and a few of my colleagues, we kept hacking into whatever information, any data we could find connected to Victor. He had always seemed too slick, too perfect on the outside, and I was convinced that his success wasn't as clean as he wanted people to believe. The process wasn't easy. We started by trying to break into some of the more obscure records, looking for hidden accounts, transactions, anything that might point to shady dealings. For weeks, we kept hitting dead ends. We tried different angles, digging through old emails, legal documents, even business networks he had connections with. But Victor had covered his tracks well, and the frustration was beginning to weigh on us. But then, after what felt like endless attempts, we found it. A single crack in Victor's perfectly polished armor. We stumbled across an old email chain buried deep in an encrypted server. It wasn't much at first, just some correspondence between Victor and a few key figures from his time as an executive director. But when we dug deeper, the pieces started to fall into place. Victor's wealth and success weren't the result of hard work and talent. No, he had been involved in dirty deeds for years. We uncovered proof that while he was still an executive, he had been trading insider information to competitors, making backdoor deals that padded his bank account and ruined others. That was just the beginning. When he left that position to start his own business ventures, he had used tax evasion schemes to protect his profits, funneling money through shell companies and offshore accounts. When we finished piecing it all together, I sat back, stunned. We had found exactly what we needed, maybe even more than I'd hoped for. All of Victor's secrets, his criminal past, were right there in front of us. We analyzed the data, packaging everything neatly into a special presentation, a bombshell of evidence that would blow his world apart. Now, I needed to use it. I decided to drop the information anonymously. I wasn't looking for credit. I just wanted to watch Victor's empire crumble, to see the smug grin wiped off his face. I sent the information to journalists, business associations, and law enforcement agencies, knowing that once the right people saw it, there would be no turning back. It didn't take long for the resonance to hit. Within days, headlines started popping up everywhere. Business reporters were all over the story, executive exposed, Victor's dirty dealings revealed. His name was plastered across every major news outlet, and the scandal quickly became a talking point in business circles. Law enforcement began sniffing around, looking into his financial dealings with renewed interest. His partners, sensing blood in the water, started pulling away from him, distancing themselves from the stench of corruption. Victor was in trouble, and it was only getting worse. At the same time, I knew I couldn't wait for my payout from the startup to come through. The process was moving fast, and I needed to strike while Victor was reeling from the fallout. Without waiting, I took out a loan and used the money to hire a team of top-tier lawyers. It was a risk, but I was ready to do whatever it took to begin the judicial review of the custody case. The lawyers I hired were relentless. They knew the system inside and out, and with the scandals surrounding Victor growing, it gave us the leverage we needed to reopen the case. I was preparing to fight like I never had before. This time, it wasn't just about legal technicalities or visitation rights. It was about saving my children from a man who had shown them nothing but lies, manipulation, and control. I had the truth on my side now, and I was going to use it. Victor's world was crumbling, and with it, his iron grip on the kids began to loosen. The scandals surrounding his business had exploded across the media, forcing him to divide his attention between salvaging his reputation and maintaining control over Olivia and Ethan. But the custody trial? That was the final blow, and it pissed him off like nothing else. I had assembled a team of brilliant lawyers, led by Susan, sharp, beautiful, and ruthless in the courtroom. She was exactly what I needed, and from the moment she took on my case, I knew I was in good hands. Susan had a way of cutting through the legal noise, always a step ahead of Victor's attorneys. And she wasn't just focused on the custody details, she was pressing hard on the fact that Victor was now involved in a criminal investigation. Susan didn't miss a beat. She arranged for psychological evaluations for Olivia and Ethan, pushing to get to the heart of what had been happening in Victor's home. Both kids began opening up, telling the truth about their life under Victor's control. The court began to see the cracks in Victor's seemingly perfect life, and it was only a matter of time before it all unraveled. Victor and Sarah weren't happy, not by a long shot. With the trial underway, the kids slowly started to break free from Victor's manipulative hold. Olivia, once confused and torn, was now clear about what she wanted. She was done with Victor. Ethan, too, was becoming bolder, telling the court how Victor had controlled and pressured him since the day he moved in. But as the truth came out, Victor's fury grew. After one particularly tough hearing, he was waiting for me outside the courthouse. His face was twisted with anger as he stormed toward me. "You think you've won, don't you?" he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "You're the one who started this whole mess with my business, aren't you?" I can feel it in my gut. It was you. I stood my ground, my jaw clenched. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. But you deserve everything that's coming to you. Victor's eyes narrowed, his fists clenched at his sides. "You'll regret this, Mark. I swear it. You won't get away with this." Before I could respond, Victor lunged at me, throwing a wild punch that barely grazed my jaw. I shoved him back, adrenaline surging through me. "You're going to learn your lesson, you bastard," I growled, pushing him away as a few bystanders rushed over to separate us. "You've destroyed too much. You're done." Victor spat at the ground in front of me before stalking off, his threats still ringing in my ears. But I wasn't scared. I was ready for whatever came next. A few days later, Susan and I were out for dinner, going over the latest developments in the case. The restaurant was quiet, and for a moment, it felt good to just sit and talk with her. She had been a rock for me throughout the trial, brilliant, strategic, and unrelenting. There was something more between us, though. I could feel it, and I knew she could too. As we finished our meal and stepped outside, heading toward our cars, a group of men appeared from the shadows. At first, I didn't think much of them, but then they rushed us. "Get down!" I shouted, pulling Susan behind me just as one of the men swung a bat toward us. I barely managed to block the hit, shoving the thug back as another one lunged at me. The fight was fast, chaotic. I threw a few punches, managing to knock one of them down, but not before I felt a sharp pain in my side. One of them had hit me hard, and I stumbled, my vision blurring for a moment. Susan screamed, but I managed to protect her, pushing her out of the way as I kept fighting off the attackers. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the thugs ran off, leaving me bleeding and breathless on the ground. Susan rushed over to me, her face pale with shock. "Mark, are you okay?" "Oh my God." "I'm fine," I grunted, wincing as I pressed a hand to my side. "It's just a scratch." We both knew it wasn't a random attack. Victor had sent them, there was no doubt in my mind. He was desperate, furious, and willing to do anything to scare me off. But it wasn't going to work. After the attack, something shifted between Susan and me. The intensity of the case, the close calls, and the long hours together had drawn us closer. There was an undeniable chemistry between us, and as we continued working side by side, a light flirtation developed. It started with small smiles, lingering touches, and late-night conversations that had nothing to do with the case. We were both professionals, focused on the fight ahead, but there was no denying the growing connection. Susan wasn't just helping me win the case, she was becoming someone I could rely on in ways I hadn't expected. As the trial dragged on, Olivia and Ethan reached their breaking point. One night, they ran away from Victor and Sarah's house. Olivia managed to call me, her voice shaking with fear. "Dad, we're scared. Victor's losing it. He's acting crazy, and Mom, she's not helping. We can't stay there anymore." I immediately told them to come to my house, and within an hour, they were both there, exhausted but safe. Olivia hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have seen this sooner." Ethan clung to me as well, his voice barely a whisper. "I love you, Dad. I don't want to go back." I held them both close, my heart swelling with both relief and determination. Victor's control was slipping, and now, with the kids back with me, I knew we were closer than ever to winning this battle. I had the children. After everything we'd been through, after the chaos and manipulation, Olivia and Ethan were finally with me. Sarah called relentlessly at first, her voice shrill with fury, accusing me of kidnapping them. "You have no right," she screamed over the phone one night. "There are children, Mark. You can't just take them." I could hear the madness in her voice, the desperation. She and Victor had completely lost it. I calmly told her that the kids had come to me on their own, that they were safe, and that I wasn't keeping them against their will. But Sarah didn't care about the truth. Victor, predictably, made it worse. He and Sarah tried to file a counterclaim, accusing me of kidnapping the children. But by then, Victor's world had already begun to crumble. The scandal surrounding his business was growing, and he was on the verge of being arrested. His arrogance had finally caught up with him, and no amount of money or manipulation could save him now. Meanwhile, Susan and her legal team were relentless in court. She pressed every angle, bringing up the emotional and psychological damage Victor and Sarah had inflicted on the kids. The judges saw through it all. They saw through the lies, the manipulation, and most importantly, the fear that had consumed my children under Victor's control. It wasn't long before we won the custody case. I'll never forget the day the ruling came down. Sitting in that courtroom, hearing the words, "full custody awarded to Mark," was like the final release of all the tension I had been holding for months. It was over. I had won. We had won. Things quickly spiraled for Victor after that. A few weeks later, news broke that he had fled the country. Apparently, he had disappeared somewhere in Europe, leaving behind a trail of scandals, lawsuits, and arrest warrants. Sarah had gone with him, and according to Olivia, who had overheard some conversations, Sarah was pregnant. It was almost surreal. Victor, the man who had nearly taken everything from me, was gone. Disappeared. And Sarah? Well, as far as I was concerned, she had made her choice. She had chosen Victor, chosen to run from the life she once had. And now, she was just gone. Olivia and Ethan stayed with me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, our lives started to find a sense of peace. The tension, the fear, the chaos, it all began to fade. We could breathe again. As for Susan, our relationship had continued to grow during the trial. She wasn't just my lawyer anymore. She had become my partner in every sense of the word. And to my relief, the kids weren't just okay with it, they were happy. They had grown to love Susan too, and in many ways, she had become part of the family. We had gone through hell together, but now things were looking up. Life was finally starting to feel normal again. There were no more threats, no more manipulation, no more Victor lurking in the background. Just me, my kids, and Susan building something new from the ashes of what had been. Looking back on it all, I couldn't help but think of the lessons I had learned along the way. I had lost battles, made mistakes, and suffered more than I ever thought I could. But in the end, I had won the war. I had saved my children, rebuilt my life, and found new love. Now, I could say with confidence, I read Sun Tzu for a reason. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. You can also give your opinion about this drama. It's important for everyone. I wish you all good luck and see you soon.